Well, good morning. Today we're going to be in Genesis chapter 32, verse 22 through 32. When I was growing up, there's a time when I was about 16 years old, and due to some circumstances outside of her control, one of my older sisters moved back into my parents' house. Her name was Cassie, and she had two little boys, Owen and Elijah. And every Thursday night, Cassie had to close up the shop that she worked at, which means that I got to tuck Owen and Elijah into bed. And every Thursday night, I would go down, and before they would go to sleep, I would tell them a story. I would tell them an Andrew and Colby story. And Colby was this fictional character that I made up. And at the end of every story, Colby always ended up in his underwear. It's little boy's comedy gold. And so I always got to laugh no matter what. But why do I tell this story? Because everyone loves stories. From little boys getting ready for bed to adults making billion-dollar movies. Everyone loves a good story. And if you were like me, in junior high or high school, in your English and composition class, you learn the building blocks of a story. And if you don't remember them or you didn't learn it, that's okay. There's traditionally 5 blocks that build a good story. There's exposition, which is the setting. There's the rising action, which is the building of the tension. It's an awkward phase to be in. There's the climax. This is the exciting bit. This is the apex of the story. Then there's the falling action, which is tidying up loose ends. And then, of course, the resolution, the conclusion of the story. And when we get to Genesis 32, verse 32, we plant ourselves right in the middle of an amazing story. And what's more than that, we plant ourselves right in the exciting bit, right in the apex, right in the climax of a man named Jacob's life. Therefore, in order to fully appreciate this text, we're going to need to see what's going on. We need the context of what is happening right here. In Genesis 32, verse 22, that same night, Jacob rose and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford to the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and everything else he had. But Jacob was left alone. The first part of this story is the setting. Well, what's going on here? Why is Jacob at this river? Why does he stay on one side by himself? Why does he send his children on and his wives on to the other side? And why is he left alone? Well, in order to understand this, of course, we need the setting. We need to understand the context. And in order to do that, we have to rewind all the way back to chapter 25, to the day Jacob was born. We're in the Middle East. There's a warm breeze blowing in through the Mediterranean. In Genesis 25, verse 22, the children struggled within her. That's Rebekah. And she said, "If it is thus, why is this happening to me?" So she went and asked of the Lord. And the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 people from within you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall be served by the younger. So from the beginning, we see a little bit of foreshadowing. God tells Rebekah that you have twins in you, and they're going to not get along. Well, perhaps a few weeks later, we're in that tent again, right off the Mediterranean, and we hear a blood-curdling cry that's coming from one of the neighboring tents. And we poke our heads out, and we see a servant girl running into a tent with water and towels, and we know that Rebekah is having her children. So in chapter 25, verse 24, when her days to give birth were completed, behold, there were twins in her womb. The first came out and was red. All his body was like a hairy cloak. So they called his name Esau, which means red. Afterward, his brother came out, with his hand holding Esau's heel. So his name was Jacob. Jacob, which means he takes by the heel or he cheats. Something you need to know is that names in the Bible are extremely important. Names back then were a lot more important than they traditionally are now. Because with a name, you could tell what a person was like. You could tell their character. So Moses means drawn out. He was drawn out of the Nile. Because he was drawn out of the river, that was his name given to him. And he would later help draw out Israel from Egypt. Joshua means Yahweh's salvation. It is only because of Yahweh that Joshua was able to destroy the Israelites' enemy inside the Promised Land. Abraham means father of nations. God even reveals his name to the people of Israel, each time revealing an aspect of who he is. Jehovah Jireh, the Lord provides. Jehovah Rapha, the Lord heals. Jehovah Ra'ah, the Lord is my shepherd. See, names are important because they reveal who a person is. And from the beginning, we see that Jacob is a deceiver. And so he's not off to a very great start. This is the setting. This is the background of where we are. Two brothers being born in an ancient culture. Next, we have the rising climax. The part of the journey where things get awkward. The tension is rising. In our story this morning, we're going to feel the tension rising between Jacob and Esau. I never had a close brother growing up. The closest brother I have is 17 years older than I am. So we never share the same concerns, really. When I was learning to walk, he was getting married. I was drooling on my shirt and he was paying rent. We didn't really have this conflict that we feel with Jacob and Esau, these twins. So fast forward a number of years after their birth. We don't know exactly how long, but they're old enough to be able to go hunting by themselves and to cook. One day, Esau was out in the field. He's probably working really hard. He forgot to eat breakfast. His blood sugar is low. He stumbles into the camp and he smells something. He smells, it's his brother's favorite, or his brother's famous red stew. It's Esau's favorite. And so he stumbles into the tent, and sure enough, Jacob is putting in the last ingredient to his famous red stew. And Esau stumbles in, barely being able to stand up. His sweat stain is covering his entire shirt. He can't swallow very well because he has cotton mouth. And he says, brother, give me some of that red stew. And perhaps Jacob was planning this, or maybe he just took an opportunity that he saw. But Jacob says, I will give you this red stew right here if you give me your birthright. This amazing red stew you can have if I get your birthright. So what's on the line? What is a birthright? Well, see, a birthright was the promise of getting a double portion of his inheritance. So he would get double of everything. So right now, Esau, because he's the oldest, would get a double portion whenever his father died. Which meant that if Jacob got 50 sheep, Esau would get 100. If Jacob got 15 tents, Esau would get 30. If Jacob got the crock pot, Esau would get the Foreman grill and the rice cooker. He got twice of everything. So the birthright is a pretty big deal. And Jacob is saying, I'll trade you this pot of stew for a birthright. But you see, the scales aren't even. This is a birthright, and this is a stew. But Esau is so hungry. He says, I'm so hungry, I'm going to die. Just give me that stew. He sounds like a 4-year-old here. But he does it. Esau trades his birthright for a bowl of stew. And after this, Esau regains his strength, and he leaves away resenting his birthright. He hates it now. He's so upset. Well, this is only the beginning of the conflict between Jacob and Esau. So you fast forward a couple more years. Jacob and Esau's father, Isaac, is getting very, very old. His wrinkles are doubling. It's taking him an extra minute every day to get out of bed. But pretty soon he will hardly be able to get out of bed. He's also losing his sight. He's blind now. In Genesis 27, starting at verse 1, when Isaac was old and his eyes were dim so that he could not see, he called Esau his older son. He said, my son. And he answered him. He said, here I am. He said, behold, I am old. I do not know the days of my death. Now then, take your weapons, your quiver and your bow, and go out to the field and hunt game for me. And prepare for me delicious food, such as I love. And bring it to me so that I may eat it, that I may bless you before I die. Isaac is saying, I don't know how much longer I have, but it is my duty as the father to bless my child before I die. So he tells Esau, go catch some meat, cook it, prepare it for me so I can bless you. So Esau strings his bow, he puts on his boots, he throws on his neon orange hat and vest, and he goes out to hunt some game. And as soon as Esau leaves, Rebekah overheard that conversation. And so she goes to Jacob, and she says, okay, I have an idea of how you can steal Esau's blessing, because Jacob was Rebekah's favorite. But Jacob is understanding. He says, but I can't deceive my father. Like Esau, when he was born, was as hairy as a cloak. We think a baby is hairy if they have a full head of hair, but this guy came out wearing a cloak. He says, I'm nothing like my brother. She said, that's okay. What you can do is go get 2 young goats, and I will prepare your father's favorite meal, and you can take the skin of these young goats, and you can put them on the back of your hands and your neck. And what's crazy to me is that young goats have just as much hair as old goats. It's just less long. Think of like a short-haired dog. That's how much hair. So this man was very hairy. And so Jacob takes the 2 young goats. He gives it to his mom. She's lived with Isaac now for a long time. She knows how to make his favorite meals. And so Jacob takes the skin, and somehow he's gluing it to his hands and the back of his neck. Not sure how he did that. And as he's putting on Esau's clothes, that way he smells like him. And he gets the meal from his mom, and he goes in to his father, Isaac. So he goes in. Now he smells like Esau because he's wearing Esau's clothes. He has a delicious meal, and he also feels like Esau. So he goes in and he says, "My father." And as Isaac says, "I am here." Who are you? Are you my son? And Jacob says, "Yes, I'm your eldest son, Esau. I have done what you told me. I have caught game because I am a really good huntsman, and I made this meal for you, me, no one else, and so bless me." That's what he's saying. And but Isaac isn't convinced. He says, "How did you catch the game so quickly? Like, you were barely gone. How do you just go and catch something that fast?" But Jacob, very quick on his feet, says, "The Lord blessed me and granted me success." Yeah, when you pull something out of the pen, it's very easy to shoot it. And so Isaac says, "Come closer, that I may feel you, oh my hairy son Esau." And then so he feels him. He says, "Okay, you feel like Esau, but you sound like Jacob." He says, he asks him one more time, "Are you really, actually, truly my son Esau?" Jacob says, "I am." So Isaac says, "Okay, I'm old. Maybe I'm just losing my hearing." So he does bless him. And this is the blessing he gives to Jacob. It says, "See, the smell of my son is as the smell of the field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you of the dew of heaven and of the fatness of the earth, and plenty of grain and wine. Let people serve you and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you." That's a lot of blessing that Esau was supposed to receive, that Jacob stole. But it's too late. He stole the blessing. Jacob deceived his father Isaac. And so as soon as he exits through the back of the tent, Esau walks in with his meal that he worked really hard for. And he says, "Father, I'm here." He says, "Who are you?" I just blessed your son, or your brother." And Esau weeps. He says, No. Is there any blessing you can give me? Please, bless me in some way. And Isaac says, "I don't have much blessing to give you," but this is what he blesses him with. He says, "Behold, away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be, and away from the dew of heaven on high. By your sword you shall live, and you shall serve your brother. But when you grow restless, you shall break the yoke from his back." This wasn't much of a blessing he received. Away from the fatness of the earth, the soil isn't going to be good. Away from the dew of heaven, you're not going to get good rain. You're going to have many battles because by your sword you shall live. This isn't much of a blessing at all. And Esau is very upset. He's furious. There was a time when I was around 14 years old. We didn't have much sweets from Walmart in my house growing up. But there's one morning, somehow, I still have no idea how it got there. I went down, and in our freezer was a toaster strudel. And we don't get toaster strudels. And I get down there, and I see it, and I'm excited. But my older sister, Audrey, she called it. Before I could, my sister called it. And by the universal rules of calling it, lo and behold, it was hers without any rebuttal or excuse. So it was my sister's toaster strudel. And she didn't eat it, though. She left it in the freezer. She left it there for a couple days, and I was like, she hasn't eaten it. But it's hers because she called it. Well, there was one morning, I went down before everyone else, and I threw that bad boy in the toaster. I threw it down, popped up, I spread my icing on it. It was the best toaster strudel I've ever had. But Audrey was not very happy with me, as you can imagine, because toaster strudels is manna from heaven. And so Audrey was very upset, and she was very angry at me. And to try to appease her, for the next 5 years or so, every Christmas I would go to Walmart and I would buy her a box of toaster strudels just to make her happy. But see, Jacob stole more than a toaster strudel from Esau. Esau, he's more than angry. He is furious. He is resenting his brother. This is wrath. This is disdain. And he says, is he not rightly named Jacob a deceiver? And Esau, a man whose name is red, I can imagine his face getting redder than a ripe tomato as his blood is just boiling. And he starts planning to kill his younger brother. Can you feel the tension rising? So Jacob, knowing that Esau is out to kill him, flees to a faraway, distant land, to a land of his relative named Laban's house. And while he is at Laban's, the Lord blesses him. The blessing that Isaac gave him comes true. And over the course of more than 14 years, and then some, he gets married twice to Leah and Rachel and has at least 11 sons. And he works hard, and he reaps from the fatness of the earth, just like the blessing Isaac gave him. He gains massive herds of sheep, a herd of donkeys, a herd of camels, and a herd of children. Jacob prospers. That's okay, that was funny, you can laugh. Jacob prospers so much that he can no longer stay with Laban. So he knows it's time to go back home. It's time to go back home to the land where he belongs. But Esau's there, the man who's out to kill him. So he heads home, even with his 2 wives, his 2 mistresses, his many sons, and much wealth. Jacob still does not feel safe from his big red angry brother, who's probably been brooding for all these many years. And when we're approaching the climax of our story, and as he's heading home, his servant comes and whispers in his ear and says, Esau is on his way to meet you with 400 men. That's the size of a small army. Now Jacob is trembling in his sandals, and he comes up with a plan. He says, I will put my group in order, and I will be at the back. That way when Esau comes, I'll be the last person he sees. And he sends a gift to Esau to try to appease his brother's anger. And he does it. He sends 3 gifts to him. That way Esau takes a couple steps and he receives a gift. He says, oh, that's really nice. Take a couple more steps and receives another gift. Take a couple more steps, and hopefully by this time he's not angry anymore. And the gift is 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes, and 20 rams, 30 milking camels and their calves, 40 cows and 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys and 10 male donkeys. Not only is this a large gift, but it's a sustaining gift. It will get bigger. And so we're at this point where the next day he's going to meet his brother. And he sends his family on ahead of him. And see, it's getting late. He's almost home, but he waits it out one more night. See, he stays on the bank of the Jabbok, a small river, but sends his family on ahead of him. He stays alone on this side. And this is the climax. This night is the climax of Jacob's life. The sun is setting over the mountains of the Middle East. The air is cooling down. All Jacob can hear is the bubbling of the Jabbok and the crickets in the tall reeds. The sky is turning black as Jacob's darkest hour is approaching, his darkest night. See, this is the climax of our story. As far as Jacob knows, he kissed his children goodbye for the last time. This may be the last time he looks up and sees the stars, because his brother Esau is on the other side. As far as he knows, Esau is waiting to kill him. Jacob deceived Esau twice now, but there's no way he can trick his way out of this one. It's dusk, and we see Jacob at the Jabbok, the cool air coming off of the running river. See, there are certain things we should expect when we see a Bible character that comes to a riverbank. Just like when we see certain things, we expect certain things to happen. When people at Ozark see a man wearing khakis, a button-up, and a suit jacket, they either expect that he's giving a Tuesday tour or he's preaching. When you see people at Ozark dressed as hipsters, they probably only drink zinc coffee. These are certain expectations we have. When we come to a Bible character that comes to a riverbank, we expect something to happen. We expect God to do something amazing. See, Moses was a miracle. He was drawn out of the Nile. Elijah went up into heaven. Elijah picked up his mantle at a river. Both Daniel and Ezekiel received their instructions from God near a river. Jesus was baptized in the Jordan and then heard the voice of God. See, we see Jacob left on the Jabbok River. We can expect God to do something. Chapter 32, verse 24. And Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip pocket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. See, they wrestled for hours, neither one yielding to the other. And so the man supernaturally touched Jacob's hip pocket, and it became dislocated. I wonder if this is when Jacob realized he wasn't wrestling with a normal man. And the man said, "Let me go, for day is broken." See, Jacob wrestled with this stranger all night long. In the cool mountain air and the babbling brook close by, the two men are slippery, sweaty, dirty, gross, sore. They wrestled all night long. A high school wrestling match usually only lasts 3 minutes, but this went on for more than 3 hours, most likely. And the man said, "Let me go, for day is broken." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." Jacob, always aware of an opportunity to be blessed. And he said, "What is your name?" And he said, "My name is Jacob." See, after wrestling with this man, soon to be revealed as God, Jacob must confess who he is. At the climax of his story, he had to confess, "My name is Jacob the deceiver." Clinging on to this man for hours after wrestling with him. He is weak, he is limp, and he's asking this man to bless him. Years of deceiving, he confesses who he is. "My name is Jacob." Then he said, "Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men and have prevailed." He's no longer the deceiver, but one who fights with God and overcomes. Just as names in the Bible are typically important to who a person was, a changed name is doubly so. We have Abram to Abraham, Sarai to Sarah, Simon to Peter, Saul to Paul. See, although Jacob has very much demonstrated the attributes of his name throughout his life, deceiving people, he's been given a new name. He's no longer the deceiver. He's now Israel. And with a new name comes a new character. At the climax of his life, at the apex of his journey, when he wrestled God, God gave him a new name, a new identity. He isn't the same man he was the day before. See, when God changed Jacob's name, it transformed his life. Verse 29, then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the name Penuel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and my life has been delivered." The sun rose upon him as he passed Penuel, limping because of his hip. The day Jacob wrestled with God was the climax of his life. His life was changed forever. He received a new name and a new identity. The night God changed Jacob's name, it transformed his life. That's the climax. Quickly after we have the falling action, Jacob, or now Israel's life, we're tying up the loose ends of his story. What happened between him and his brother? Because of Jacob's identity, when he was hiding in the back of his camp, he now goes to the front. He now meets Esau first. He has a changed character with his changed name. He doesn't know what's going to happen. Is his brother Esau going to kill him? So he goes to the front. And then we see the resolution, the conclusion of our story. Jacob met his brother. And just as God had been working on Jacob's heart, he must have been working on Esau's. Because Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. See, this is the end of this long story this morning. Jacob wrestled God, and God gave Jacob a new identity, and it changed the way he lived. He was no longer the deceiver. He was now Israel, the one who strives with God. So what? Why would I spend all this time this morning telling a long story? See, I believe the story of Jacob wrestling God reflects our hearts when we are in darkness, when we wrestle with God. I believe the climax of each of our lives was the day that we clung on to God and we asked Him to bless us. When we had our old identity. We had our old identity, we were deceivers. We were liars, cheaters, gossipers, and we asked God to bless us. We asked Him for the greatest blessing, to be Lord of our lives. And God blessed us. He gave us a new identity. We are no longer deceivers, liars, cheaters. We are now children of God. With this new identity, as Jesus, Lord of our lives, we should no longer live in darkness because we are children of light. I pray this morning that we remember that because God changed our names, we live according to our new names as children of God. Let's pray. God, thank you so much this morning for the opportunity to share your word. I pray for everyone here that we would continue to look more like you as children of God and less like ourselves. Thank you for writing our stories. And I pray that you'd be the hero of our stories every time. In your Son's name I pray. Amen.